Hey, Rob.
Good morning.
Good morning. How's it going?
Pretty well. How you doing?
Not too bad. Going on vacation next week, so good. Ready to take a bit of a break.
Where are you going?
Yeah, just to the island, going to Souk for 5 days. Just takes a couple hours of drive and a ferry ride.
My sister and her family live on Lummi.
Okay. Do they like it? I guess it's kind of quiet.
Yeah, they've been there for, I don't know, 20 years or something. So I guess that's the answer.
Yeah. I think lots of people like it there. Yeah, I think I would go crazy. It's a bit too quiet in the island, but maybe you get used to it and then you can't live anywhere else.
I don't know. I would like it. But yeah, I like Vancouver too. It's great.
Yeah.
Everything out there is getting a bit expensive.
Yeah, it's getting expensive. There are no doctors. Yeah, lots of things are going wrong, but I guess it's not just Vancouver. So you're muted, David.
I'm just wondering what the topic was, sorry.
Just chit-chatting about the island. I was just telling Rob I'm going on vacation next week to the island.
Oh, nice. Whereabouts?
Yes.
You going up to the top, to the wild parts, or?
No, just to Souk.
Souk.
I don't actually know exactly where it is. My girlfriend booked it, so I'm just going to be as surprised as you are.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's see, there's a Souk Harbor House restaurant on Vancouver Island.
Yeah, that's probably around there.
It spells, I'm sorry, I'm confused now. So how do you spell Souk?
S-O-O-K-E.
S-O-O-K-E.
I think it was there. It's like a really high-end restaurant.
It's not part of.
It's by the water, so it has
Oh, yeah. Okay, so, oh, interesting. Oh, wow. Yeah, I know what that is. That's gorgeous. Yeah, that's, yeah, it's really, really nice area. Ella Beach, yeah. Cool. Well, you'll have a wonderful time there.
Are you going to have internet access?
I believe so. I hope so.
That's too bad.
No, I go crazy without it.
You'd adjust surprisingly quickly.
Yeah, I guess if you don't have any choice. Yeah, that's fair enough. I should do one of those internet detoxes that people talk about. I've never been brave enough to try it.
Kids need to do that for about a year each. But anyway, no, it's fine. Alright, yeah. So how's your project coming with the information theory? I have actually read the Pierce book. He was actually one of the instigators, and another book that you suggested I read, which I did read, which was The Idea Factory, I think, significantly covers his achievements, which were remarkable all by themselves. So he launched the world's first satellite and a bunch of other, not the world's first satellite, but the one that reflected, everyone could see with their naked eye.
I see.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah,
so have you made any progress?
Yeah, I'm working on it. Yeah, I'm still reading through it. I'm about halfway through it, but I got to the part that's the most interesting, so I've slowed down, which is the efficient encoding stuff, compression stuff. But yeah, I think I know the general approach. I just need to make it work for my case. And yeah, for the case I'm working on, there is like 18, basically it's a language with like 18,000 alphabets, which makes it like really, really hard to experiment. So I'm just creating a sub problem that's easier so that I can figure this out before going to the main problem. I think I should have done that from the beginning, but I was a bit lazy. I thought it would just work.
Interesting. Yeah, so I've had a really interesting week. I spent so I told you about the SIGGRAPH thing we were working on, and a bunch of other scientists were essentially related to the project, and I've been meeting with them. So there's a group that's out of Finland that's doing some really interesting work, and another lady kind of takes a bit of a lead in, but yeah, so basically I've been trying to get scientific insight on some of the stuff we've been talking about from very different perspectives. Yeah, so one of the critical questions I've been struggling with, which is, given two choices, which one is better, right? How do we assess whether one choice that we make is better than another? I'm curious what your thoughts are on that before I kind of tell you what the various different thoughts were. So if I give you two choices, do you rationalize them? Do you kind of do a calculation in your head as to which choice is better, or do you just kind of do it with the gut? Or, I mean, how should we
That really depends on what the choices are. Like, I mean, if it's two chocolate bars, I might do it with my gut, but if it's two different cities to live in, I might take a while with spreadsheets and everything, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
did you see that piece that Pym talked about earlier? What do you call it? Paradox of choice.
The paradox of choice. Yes, I read that. It was very
Yeah, that's
good.
pretty interesting.
Yeah. So that's exactly where I'm going with all of this. So yeah, so one of the experiments that we have, and I'm curious so the idea was that you have an environment, and then you give somebody a set of cognitive tasks to perform. So you have to, solve a Rubik's Cube or answer 5 questions or something. I don't know what the actual task is. And then essentially we put you in a different environment. We ask you the same things, and we essentially try and assess your cognitive performance based on how well you do given some environment. And then if your cognitive performance improves, then quote unquote, that is better. So they're not asking you to make an assessment directly. They're giving you a set of activities to perform, and essentially your ability to perform the activities is the metric of betterness, if you will. What are your thoughts about that? That seems very...
Yeah, it sounds a lot like what Roblox does, the company Roblox. So they develop basically games there's a free Roblox where you can use to make games and do whatever you want. But then with their clients, they develop games to assess ability of, let's say, people you want to interview for a job or people in school. And that's sort of their whole thing is, how do you design these games to better assess for whatever you're assessing?
Oh, I see. Right.
And they hire like psychologists, like they have like research psychologists. It's not just computer scientists doing these things, it's actual psychologists.
I see. Yeah, so that's one kind of a metric, but it doesn't give you any kind of, it's quantitative, but it's not qualitative. It's just, well, if we want people to perform better, we'll put them in blue rooms with plants in them, because we found that when you put people in blue rooms with plants in them, they perform better. It might be utterly miserable, but the other problem we ran into at SIGGRAPH, which was a real nightmare, was how do you assess the same thing? So we had this A/B test where you would fly using one technique and then you would fly using another technique. And we'd ask you, which one's better? And then you have to kind of say, okay, do I remember how I felt after the first test? And then how can I compare that to what happened after the second test? And then I have to make this assessment. Okay, they were different, but which one's better?
But there's also a problem, right? Like the way you mentioned, if you want to assess it based on how much you learned, let's say in one versus the other, how much you got your performance improved, maybe that's inconsistent with your subjective experience, right? Maybe you had to suffer to have your performance improve and you don't like it.
This is my point. Yes, you've got it. So
yeah, I mean, those are tough questions. I can't remember the name of the effect. There's a special name for this, but there were some studies done where they were trying to assess worker productivity. And it was something like they tried dimming the lights, making them less bright, and then productivity went up. and then they tried dimming them more and the productivity went up, and then they tried increasing it again and the productivity went up. So there's, my takeaway is I think these tests can be less precise than perhaps the data would suggest. It's not a reason for not doing it, but there's just, I spent a long time looking at a bunch of this psychology experimental literature, and
yeah, there's a lot of confounders, right, that you can't know, and you can easily imagine what if this, and they say, well, we don't know, and if that's the case, then whatever you said is completely wrong.
yeah. So, or in another context, I've done a lot of work, or did a lot of work with survey research, and how you represent a question can make a material difference on the answer. And sometimes it's really even subtle things, kind of like if you're asking a question verbally, sort of the inflection of your voice. So just a cautionary note, that's all.
Yeah, the other thing that I found very weird is that everyone in the psychology realm stops well short of actually trying to model what's actually going on in people's heads. So there was this movement called positivism, where they essentially gave up on trying to model how we think, and they just said, human beings are black boxes, we'll collect statistics, and then we'll just use, statistical inference to work out, to make predictions. We won't try and, basically. And then you read a book like McGilchrist, and he relates like a fraction of the cognitive literature, which is very, very clear and very, very specific on, brain structure and how it all works, and what's connected to what, and if this part of your brain's damaged, then this has this effect, and so on. So there's all this evidence about brain structure and structure of thought and all this other stuff, and the psychologists won't go near it with a barge pole.
But
And
does
so,
it have like instrumental power? Like I can imagine that if something is happening, then you can go back and explain it in terms of the physical, whatever aspects of the brain. But if you want to actually predict whether I would like this versus that, I would say it's probably wise to stay away from how my brain is structured, because you're never going to get anywhere.
okay, so so you agree with them that it's pointless to try and model.
Well, not that it's pointless, it's just that we just don't know nearly enough to be successful. I mean, you can explain away things that you observe in terms of disease. If you cut away half of my brain, what would I do? Like that kind of extreme cases, I think you can explain. But if I choose whatever, this chocolate bar versus that, I don't think you can find that information in my brain structure. In principle, you could, but I think it's just really, really hard.
Okay. Yeah, because they won't even go near it. Like, I keep suggesting that we could build a model of mind, and I've actually built a model of mind in my agent simulator, which is fairly sophisticated, and I showed it to them. And it was just like an anathema to them, like, oh no, we don't do that. We just run we run studies, and then we publish the statistical results, and
well, that's a lot easier, right?
That's it. That's the end. I'm stopping here. I'm not actually going to try and actually solve any problems. I'm just going to publish a paper with some statistics in it, and my my H value will go up, and everything will be great, and I'll get tenure, and that's all I care about.
Just summed up the whole academia.
I think you summed it up pretty well. But a couple of observations. One is, all right, so this is my generalization. The people I've seen get into that area because they don't want to be formal. They don't want to be technical. So there's a self-selection of people. I mean, the intersection of machine learning types and psychology is probably really low.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so that's observation number one. Observation number two, I think some of the questions, you're getting at would fit more in sort of the consumer behavior modes, marketing-ish.
Sure.
And there you've got some more kind of analytical thinking.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, so just to let you know what I'm working on, this is kind of the topic of the thing. I don't know if you saw what I posted in blog, whatever it is, alt deep. But we now have the ability with, have you looked at the GAN stuff and the neural rendering stuff at all, Payam?
A while ago, yeah, not recently.
Oh, okay. So the idea with the neural rendering stuff is they train GAN, typically it's Delta GAN or Big GAN. They train it up really, really well so that it develops this very sophisticated latent representation. And then they hijack the latent representation to render images that the decoder or the generator has never seen before. And they also, and Rob and I have been talking about hijacking the encoder, which maps things into the latent space. And the other thing I've been looking at is training models on latent representations. So one of the tricks that was used in a paper at SIGGRAPH was they essentially trained up a model that had the parameters that they cared about in it, right? So they want to, change your hair color or the size of the wheel of your car or whatever it is. So they would identify, variables that they care about, and then they would train a network to map those variables into the latent space of the generator, so that as you pull the slider left and right, the car changes from being a car to a different kind of car.
Do you know how they figured out which variables to tweak?
Just through a neural network. Literally, they.
Okay, but were they changing the actual inputs, or were they changing this, sort of reduced?
So what you do is you have a set of markups between. It's the GAN thing again. So, but instead of training the generator, you train your network. So you put in some random values and you see what it generates, and then you say that's nothing like a car, a blue car. And then you use backprop, and then basically you'll train the input model to essentially set the parameters of the latent space that you get a blue car. Right? So we could train models that would give people useful sliders, right? Useful ways of interacting with the system. So they could say, I'm interested in coffee pots, show me different coffee pots, and we could fly around the latent space of coffee pots until you found the one that you like. And then we could use similarity matching to find the coffee pot that you can actually buy that looks like the one that you like. But once again, we get into the question of which one is better and how do we assess betterness? Like, which is the better coffee shop pot?
Yeah, also, if you want to get a little bit deeper, like philosophic, I think I was looking for Jung. There's a quote from Jung. I think you're assuming that people know what they want. I think
no,
that's
I'm not.
That's
I'm
another
not,
level.
I'm
They
not,
don't
I'm
even.
not. Yeah.
So they could tell you they want something and not actually want it, right?
Right, and so this gets to the very heart of the question, which is, we now have essentially a crystal ball where you can look into all sorts of different possible futures. Okay, what are you going to do with it? Like, what's it for? What's the use case? Okay, here it is. We've got this amazing machine that can predict the future and give you all sorts of counterfactual variations of all the possibilities that are out there. What are you going to do with it? I'm curious. It's not obvious. It's not obvious what it's for. And the other question I have is the output of a GAN just digital junk? In other words, is it just, novelty, or is it actually knowledge? Can we learn something by moving through these latent spaces? Does it actually teach us anything? It certainly gives us novel experience, like we'll see stuff we've never seen before. I've never seen a face be turned into a child's face, or a man's face being turned into a woman's face, and vice versa. it's interesting, it's novel. Is it knowledge? Did I actually learn something useful, or is it just gee whiz? Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, knowledge is a tricky word. I think I don't know what you mean by
Will,
knowledge.
will it
Obviously,
improve my ability to survive? Right? Will it make
I think it's
me-
useful for sure. Yeah, it might not be. So I don't think you put in a bunch of data, you train a model, there won't be anything in there that's not in the data, right? It's not going to come up with knowledge.
This is
But-
yeah, Hume's
but-
great insight. Yeah, you'll never
but it
find
might-
anything in there that isn't in the data because of
Yeah, but you might have not noticed the connections that you will now discover. So that in that sense, it's useful. It might help with your survival, right? Like I remember, I don't remember the details, but so, you know, in different directions, you can, let's say you mentioned you change hair color, you change different things, but we discovered, for example, there is a direction that changes aspect ratio in boats, which we hadn't thought of. But I mean, you find these directions are in the model or in the latent, they get encoded in the latent space, right? So there's all these dimensions of variations that you might not be able to imagine yourself, and you might want, by exploring the model, you can say, oh, this is interesting, this is varying something that I didn't know I care about.
Okay, so in that sense, it's empowering because it gives you a novel experience, right? It gives you an experience that you couldn't get by walking around or looking in a book or searching on the internet, right? And you have more explicit control over it. So it's useful as a way of, what's the right way of saying this? It's a useful way of increasing our priors, right? Of extending our priors to give us a broader worldview and to see things in a different way. You know, I look at the street I live in and I went, oh, it's not very good. And then I can look at counterfactuals where the tree doesn't have, sorry, the street doesn't have trees, or there's street people living on the street, or, you know, and I can compare and contrast those counterfactuals. I'm not sure if they're counterfactuals, I think it's a strong word, but imagined alternatives.
Maybe that's a good way of, yeah, I think that's a good way of maybe looking at it, that if you care about like exploring subjective things, like whether you like this tree versus that, whether you like this many cars versus that, then I think it's great. But if you want to discover what is some truth about your street, I don't think the GANs are going to help you, because they're just going to hallucinate counterfactuals, right? Which might or might not be factually correct. So then
I struggle to call them counterfactuals, to be honest, because they're based on priors, but you know, what is halfway between a coffee pot and a horse? Nothing that could ever exist. I mean, a GAN will generate you a picture of that.
Yeah, so
but,
that's why like scientists really distrust these things. Like if you try to publish a physics paper using GANs, like you really have to, you got your work cut out for you, because you can't possibly like prove that whatever image you come out with or whatever thing you publish is actually true, or is it just you made it up, the GAN made it up and you had no control over it, right? Even though the two maybe
that's true.
Yeah.
But the criticism is valid.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
How about a slightly different approach? I don't know, suppose you're looking at time series data represented in a control chart. And what you're interested in is what the next data point is going to be.
Mhm.
Now, it would seem that, you know, some type of GAN might be useful in generating a prediction of that next data point, and hence leading to some, you know, likelihood of observational response. Okay, so, you know, you got a series that's drifting up. Okay, now it's getting too high. I got to intervene because this machine's going to get out of calibration or something.
Yeah, I think that's the heart of the problem, right? Like the question is whether the latent space of the GAN has discovered the true data generating function, in which case you're absolutely right. You can generate into the future indefinitely because you know exactly, it's basically you have discovered the causal model behind your process. once you do that. But then the problem is if you use GANs, which use neural networks, it's all statistical, right? There is no causality. So if you have a huge enough data set, maybe you get some glimpse of the actual data generating process, and then you will be correct, but maybe not, maybe it's completely wrong. So it's hard to guarantee one way or the other. I mean, you can try and see if it works, but it's really hard to guarantee it. But in general, I think the hope or the promise of generative models in general, whether you use neural networks or GANs or whatever, is to have that underlying sort of function that generates the data, right? If you can get that, you've already solved the problem. Basically, you've solved all problems you can possibly solve. It's just really, really hard function to get.
Well, can you learn enough about the underlying data generating process to be useful, even in the absence of any causal structures?
I would say yes, probably in some cases. Yeah,
So
that.
my answer is very subtle. I would say that it will expand your experience. And so your ability for your neural network to imagine new possibilities will improve because you will have more priors that you can move between, right? So if you imagine that your experience is this, and if I give you new priors, then the kind of the sphere of your experience can expand. Then you have more priors to draw on, you have a broader view, and you might be able to make better decisions as a human being. I don't know if it can go far beyond that, to be honest. Right, so I think there is a true benefit in using GANs to generate new experience for people because it will increase the domain of priors, right? Oh, you remember that thing that I can't even describe to you because neither of us ever seen it? Well, now you do remember it, right? So that new experience gives you a new kind of thing that you can move towards, or gives you new features that you can incorporate into your plans or predictions or ideas or thinking.
But essentially, we do that now, right? Like I would say, like if you like to show a sphere of human experiences, like we are not limited to that, right? You can imagine counterfactuals in your head, and that's basically what you're getting the GAN to do as well, right? Whatever you can imagine as
but
a
you can only imagine counterfactuals that you personally have experienced, and the GAN has seen far more than you ever will.
No, but you don't need to have experienced it to imagine it. You almost have unlimited imagination, but combining all sensory inputs. Maybe you need some help
but according to David Hume, sorry, and according to Hume, you can't. You can't imagine beyond your experience, right? You can
sorry, maybe we are using slightly different definitions of experience, but if any sort of sensory input that you could possibly have, like any visualization, anything that you can imagine visually, I don't need to have seen it, obviously, to imagine it, right? I can generate it as well as a GAN could, and probably more, right? I can imagine myself walking on Mars while having a crow on my shoulder and riding a bicycle, right? I've never experienced that, but I can easily imagine it.
Because you walked on a planet and you know what a crow looks like, and you've ridden a bicycle, right?
Yeah, so you can, so I agree that you can come up with maybe things that you've never experienced, but that's what GANs can't either, right? They can't do anything beyond that.
They can't in the general. Okay, so here's my bad argument. So my bad argument is that you can essentially train a GAN on a broader set of experiences than any individual human, not the sum total of humans. I'm not arguing that that's possible. But for an individual student, like a young student or a young person, the whole point of education is to expose them to new priors to expand their possibilities. That's essentially what the GANs can do as well, right? So it exposes.
But do you have an example? Because if you decompose experience into sensory inputs, then I don't think you can have any wider experience than any one person can have.
The GAN can't?
Yeah, so I mean, just having.
So if I lock, I'm using a ridiculous example. If I lock you in a box and show you pictures of triangles and squares, and that's all you've ever seen, and then I come along and
I'm talking about, you can construct edge cases, but for any normal human being, I don't think you can imagine anything I can't right now, given our experiences, even though they've been very different. I could be wrong.
I'm
but I don't
reluctant to
know.
argue with you because I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if you can come up with examples.
My hypothesis is that that's not the case, but I could be wrong. So don't take me too strong on that one. So let's play a game. Let's play the DALI game. All right. So I came up with a process that I think is interesting, and it's related to what we're talking about. So here's the process. So I start with an image, any image, right? And I load that into DALI, and DALI gives me a textual description of that image, right? And maybe it can generate a series of textual descriptions of that image. And then I, as a person, can pick the textual description that most closely matches what I was trying to, represent.
Sorry, I didn't even know DALI worked that way. I thought you give it the text and it gives you the image. Does it work
It goes
both
ways? You can give it the text and it'll give you an image. Right?
Okay.
All right, and vice versa. Sorry, you can give it an image and it'll give you the text. Right, it'll describe the scene. And there are models that do this. Okay, there's a whole area of machine learning. But I just walk with me. So you have a very specific life experience. You have a very specific set of priors, and theoretically, DALI has a broad set of priors because it's been trained on half the internet, right? And so here's how it works. So we have a mutual friend, Paul Werbos, who keeps sending me these papers I can't understand because I just don't know what he's talking about. I'm not trying to be mean. He's a very smart person, and I'm not smart enough to understand what he's talking about. But the way I think about that is that he has a set of prior experiences that I don't have, and those prior experiences allow him to describe things I have no understanding of. So what I was thinking of was, why don't I just plug a bunch of his text into DALI and see what it shows me, and see if that helps me understand what the hell he's trying to get at. Because I know he's a very smart man. He invented backprop, for God's sake. Like, he's a really smart guy. I just have no idea what he's talking about. So, and this led me to the following idea. So walk with me here. So you start with an image and you get some textual descriptions, and then you pick the one that most closely matches what you were trying to get at. Then you give that to DALI, and DALI generates a whole bunch of images, right? And it's not the same as the first image, right? That's not what I'm trying to get at. So of these images that I generated from the text that I generated from your image, which one most closely matches what you're trying to get at? And so it's this one. This is most closely matches. Oh, okay. Then I give that back to the image to text generator, and it generates some text. And now what's happening is I'm becoming more normative. I'm becoming more general, because DALI is taking my very, very specific image and it's generalizing it, right? It's saying, well, I've never seen this before, or I've forgotten that I saw this, but my GAN can generate other stuff. You could theoretically repeat this process and essentially build a breadcrumb trail of understanding that takes you from something which I do understand, and then I can kind of walk backwards through the thing to get to what Paul's trying to get at.
Did you get anywhere? Did you try?
I haven't tried it. I'm just curious if that's an appropriate use of GANs. Do you think? Like, is that even?
I've never seen it. It sounds interesting.
You know what I'm getting at then. Okay, so as a proof of principle, it seems to hold.
But maybe I thought of an example going back to what we were discussing before. So let's say you get DALI to generate, okay, I want a picture of a cat wearing formal clothes, right? So maybe the first thing we imagine is a cat wearing a tie or something, right? Or a tuxedo or something. But maybe somebody in England imagines a cat wearing a bow tie. Somebody in Saudi Arabia, they're wearing, I don't know, a burqa or something. So in that sense, our experiences are different, and what we think of as formal clothes might be different. Let's say I haven't even ever seen a bow tie, so I can't possibly imagine a cat with a bow tie. So in that sense, I think it could be useful to get GANs, because they would have, let's say, all sorts of clothing from all over the world that I haven't seen. And if that's something that's useful to imagine, I think that might help. Is that the kind of thing you were thinking about?
Let's try it together now. I don't know how many DALI credits I've got left, if any, but Rob's got a few, I think, so we can switch to Rob if I don't have any. But you were saying, was that a cat wearing formal clothing?
Sure.
So it can generate a bunch of images, and then we'll pick the one that most matches the one that we want, and so on. So I think that we can generalize, right?
You see, it's all ties.
Okay, I've never seen a cat wearing formal clothing. Have you?
No, but I could imagine it without having experienced it.
Okay, let's struggle with something a little bit harder to imagine, perhaps. So see, this is what troubles me, because if DALL-E can't generate anything I can't imagine myself, what's it for? Like,
Well, why don't you just take that? Why don't you take the image and have it generate the text now?
okay, so let's take, which one? Which one do you like? This one?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll copy that image or save that image. Can I save the image?
Yeah, it doesn't let you save the image. Oh, you gotta go download on the top right, I think. Top right of the image, yeah.
All right, okay, so I've got an image now. I'm going to go back to DALL-E. And then we say upload, and then we'll go to downloads, and we'll select oh, it's editing. Okay, so you can edit the image. Oh, I see.
Yeah, just keep it the same.
So, generate variations. Okay, so I can now generate variations of this image. So I can't edit, I don't get the text, but I can generate variations. But this is my point, right? You can move through the DALL-E space, which is a latent space now, as a thinking tool, and essentially use this to further refine.
It's not that much of a variation.
Right. So it's a narrowing of the latent space. But let's try something even more general. Let's try something that's very hard to imagine, which is...
I would venture to say that there's no sentence you can write down that we can't imagine.
okay, here's one. Draw me a picture of quantum gravity.
Yeah, I would probably draw that picture, the famous picture of like a ball in space-time, curving the space-time, right? In a black hole or something. It's probably going to be something to do with black holes and that curved space-time.
Did you see that Google announcement where they have an AI that can pass exams, math exams?
Yeah. That's a large language model.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
which
the
of
problem
these,
is, but the
in your
problem
mind,
is none of them. Yeah, but the problem is nobody knows, including DALL-E, what quantum gravity should look like.
but maybe it's
So,
drawn it perfectly, but because we don't, and I'm just playing devil's advocate. I'm not being strong here. I'm just saying maybe it's represented quantum gravity perfectly to us, but because we have no priors, we can't build any emotional connection to what it's showing us. And so we don't know, right? We can't even, this is the original problem I came up with, which is which one's better? I have no idea because I don't have any past experience, right? So all our assessments of betterness or not betterness are based on priors, which means that we could never find something that's better for us if we hadn't already experienced it, which I think is a bit of an oxymoron. So,
well, I mean, again, by better, do you mean like subjectively, you prefer your preference, or are you talking about the truth? Because those are very different things. You can't just use the same word for both.
okay. Fair. No, I'm not arguing with you. I'm trying to.
Because I mean, if you say which one of these is your preference for wanting to
Which one of these
represent
is your preference
quantum,
for quantum gravity?
yeah, I mean, I guess I don't understand these things, so I don't know. But yeah, maybe I
Right.
don't know, maybe the third one from the left, because it kind of shows the space-time thing. But Yeah, so that's a question you can ask, and different people will have different answers, right? So maybe I have a prior that I understand this picture and I like it more than you've never seen it, well, vice versa. But if you say which one of these is representing quantum gravity the most accurately, I would say none of them, and nobody knows, including Dolly or any other model you can train on current knowledge.
Not arguing. Okay, but do you see the dilemma? Do you see the challenge here? We now have these machines that can generate all these counterfactuals, and is it just a stupid gimmick? I don't think so. I don't think it is a stupid gimmick. But if it's not a stupid gimmick, what is it? And what can we use it for?
Yeah, I mean, I guess
sure.
the same question's also valid for like just the language models, right? Like he can generate coherent text, right?
Yeah. So they're amazing. They really are. Like the stuff I was seeing at SIGGRAPH just blew my mind. It's absolutely unbelievable what you can do now. Just
it's super useful, right? Like technologically, like I guess for language model, you can get it to summarize like long, complicated legal paragraphs in like simple language, and it would make sense to you. So in that sense, it's super useful. So if you were asking what they can do for you, there's lots of list of things that people are working on that could help you. But if you tell me, can it tell you something we didn't know before? I think the jury is out. Like, I don't know. How would you test that? Because if you didn't know it, you still don't know if you know it, because there's no way to check it. Like, I don't know. How would you verify that it teaches you something that's true, but you didn't know before?
so. Okay, so I'll just change the tone a little bit then. So my argument is that school is very normative, right? They're not trying to encourage you to create diversity. They're trying to encourage you to become general so that your concept of how to build a bridge is the same as my concept of how to build a bridge. So if you build half the bridge and I build the other half of the bridge won't fall down, right? So in that sense, formal education really is normative, right? We're trying to make everyone the same. We're not
Very
trying to
cynical
create
view
variation.
of formal education, but I guess that might be true.
Right. So I go to Grammarly and I hit the button and it makes everything normative. And then I submit the same essay as everybody else because they all use Grammarly. Right. So this is going to narrow us. This is not going to broaden our experience. We're all just going to become the same and interchangeable and worthless because we've completely commoditized ourselves into just being a body with a brain. That's a very poor future, in my opinion. Okay, so can we create personal variation? Can everyone be an individual and have unique priors? In the modern world, that's very hard because we all live in cities and we all see the same things as everybody else. But can we use these kind of generative systems to give us each a unique set of experiences that are unique to us, that are not normative, so that we have some special spark, some unique value in the world that we can bring forward based on our past experience? And perhaps generative systems are the way to do this, which is to essentially reinvigorate our uniqueness. There's this very, very terrifying section of McGilchrist where he talks about the following process. So we encounter some novelty, right? And then we start to try and understand it. And then after a while, we do understand it and we can predict what it's going to do next. And then, you know, like a little child encounters a button and they press the button and the traffic lights change. And that's very novel, right? And after a while, they know that when they press the button, the traffic light will change. And in New York, you press the button and it has actually no effect on the traffic lights at all because they're going to change anyway, but people still press buttons and they still put them in, even though they're not connected to anything. Because we've built up this prior of pressing the buttons and the light changing. And what McGilchrist's point was that after a while, once you have an understanding of how traffic lights work, you forget them. They just become mechanistic. They're just a machine. And if we become utterly predictable, then we just become machines and we just become nationalistic soldier robots who are there to serve, you know, our glorious leader, whoever that might be. And we're just a bunch of faceless engines. that's a horrible future as far as I'm concerned. So can we use this kind of technology to create a unique experience for people? I mean, that's what I'm interested in.
So I wonder, like, so let's say before these technologies, like you and I, or the three of us, I mean, it sounds like the way you're defining it, we've all had the same prior because we have lived roughly in the same part of the world. So, but we are very different people, obviously, right? And you can imagine things I can't and vice versa. So we are already unique. I think everybody's already unique just by virtue of chance, of how they were raised, where they were, what they saw, and the order in which they saw everything and processed everything. So I guess I'm wondering, is this adding something to it? Is it just another dimension trying to make it better? Or like, why do you
So
think
we have
everybody has the
unique
same prior?
experience because we can remember a time before the internet where we weren't watching the same video as half the planet.
Okay,
right?
so you're saying the new generation people have more similar priors.
Yeah, because it's all normative, because Google shares the same shit to everyone, right? They're not interested in diversity, they're interested in selling ads. And if this sold ads to this guy, then we'll just sell it to everybody else.
I think we're sort of being far too pessimistic about this. You know, when was the last time you guys solved a long division problem?
Right.
Okay, now has your life materially changed because of that? Because you no longer do long division? So the point I'm getting at is, and this is more general, we have technologies that enable us to do some things really easily now, and that frees us up to, in some sense, spend more of our time doing things that are more interesting.
But I guess people might, in general, choose not to do that, right? And just maybe absorb the same videos that everybody else is watching, and then their brain is rotting, right? Maybe that's what.
Or, you know, perhaps a more pragmatic example. I don't think anybody knows how to read a map anymore.
Right. Yeah, so our priors are diminishing, right? We're all, you know,
they're changing.
Yeah, when you read Sapiens, he makes it very clear that when you're out there and okay, so I'll go back, sorry, I think McGilchrist says it better. So if you can't build a model of something, if it's not utterly predictable, it remains interesting. Like, you know, your family and other people aren't, unless they're very sad people, aren't predictable all the time and aren't like, they don't just become things, right? They remain people because they are constantly unpredictable, right? And the value that we hold as individuals, in my opinion, is that uniqueness. It's not just the fact that we exist, it's the fact that we're unpredictable and we offer, you know, we're not just machines, we're not just predictable engines. We have this variety, and I want to try and encourage that so that everyone that we encounter is interesting and novel and has unique views. I think there's a limit, because if we get too different, then we'll start fighting each other. So that's not useful. But I just find the uniformity in this normatization, where we have these giant models that run Google and Facebook and all the other content providers. These models are normalizing everybody. We all speak English, we all wear the same clothes, we all wake up in the morning and go to work, we all do the same things every day, you know, we're all the same. And that's good for corporations, because if, you know, if part X it doesn't work anymore, we can go and get another part X and we don't have to worry about it. But if everyone's an individual, then every time somebody gets old, we have to train somebody or find somebody who can do something similar. You know, it's harder for industry. Industry wants everyone to be uniform so that they can have these replaceable parts in their institutions, but I don't think that's very humanizing. I don't know.
I mean, come on, look, we had the printing press, we had radio, we had television. Right. I mean, those are,
and they were normative, right?
Well, yeah, but we've survived those technologies and figured out how to sort of adapt within them. Newspapers.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to get is I'm trying to think of a system. I'm building a system which is, I'm hoping, is designed to give people new experience in the hope that it will have some positive effect and that they will have unique priors, that they have something interesting to say to their partner, friend, whatever. And, you know, they come alive again, right? They're not predictable and it's not always the same. You know, we can try and improve the quality of people's lives by giving them novel experience they can share with others. Is that
Actually,
a benefit?
it's actually interesting. I was just reading a book about habits, and that's one of the, like, I didn't know. So apparently habits are basically, you know what habits are. They're these shortcut sequences. You have a cue, then you have some kind of a craving, and then you just do some sequence of actions, right? And they form very naturally. It's like it's one of our basic parts of our brain. And when they're formed, they actually never disappear. You can just make it stronger or less strong. And their purpose is, once you've solved the same problem multiple times, because the brain is so energy consuming, to save energy, you will just know the solution. You just like execute. You don't think about it anymore. You automatically execute the actions. So whatever problem you see over and over again, you come up with a habit of solving it, so you don't have to think about it. So in a sense, that's,
I know, but if you've solved all the
intention.
problems and life is so predictable, your brain shuts down and you get dementia and you turn into a mindless blob like no wise father.
No, I agree. Yeah, so that's why I'm saying it's a tension between your brain trying to do as little as possible and your desire to be novel and to have new experiences.
My
Your
argument
brain-
is that it has positive health benefits to not have habits for everything, to struggle.
No, I agree. It's just that I guess evolutionarily, we always had problems to solve, so that was not a problem. But now that we have all these tools that solve most of our problems, then maybe you have to work more actively to fight against the brain's desire to have no problems, right? The brain doesn't want to have any problems. You want to have
But
problems.
when it has no problems, it dies, literally.
Yeah, and that's the way it works, right? It basically puts itself out of the job, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm trying to give it a job for mental health.
No, that makes sense.
So,
I mean, we create these games and things that we play, right? I mean, if I choose to play a 5-hour chess game, I mean, my brain probably doesn't want to do that because that's one problem it doesn't need to solve. But then I force it to do it and I enjoy it, and then I get maybe better brain function. But it's just a fight, right? A constant fight.
Right.
yeah, I mean, what sort of positive examples were you thinking of?
So you have a like the DALI thing we were exploring earlier, but it's more open-ended, right? So you, so the idea was fashion, right? So you take a photograph of yourself and you put it into DALI, and then you say, I want to the X, Y, Z. You develop this with DALI, some really cool look for you that fits your body type and what your self-image is of yourself, and you can develop this. And then you can hit a button and it will send you the instructions of how to make it, or you can give it some money and somebody who knows how to do that can make a facsimile of what you've come up with. And then when you walk down the street, you won't look the same as everybody else. You'll have a new look, right? You'll have novelty, and others will see you and they go, oh, I like that. And then they can go to their DALI machine and create a new kind of fashion for themselves. And now, rather than us all wearing the same white t-shirts and jeans every day forever, a la Steve Jobs, we create novelty and variety, and we have personality, and we're unpredictable. And oh, I haven't seen that before. Oh, Joe looked really interesting today. He was wearing a teapot on his head, right? So we can enrich our lives and enrich our experience with novelty for mental health, right? Rather than everything just coming out of a factory always the same, and we just normatize ourselves into brain death, which I think is a very negative outcome. Anyway, I'm just having a rant here, but I think there is benefit, even if the GAN just generates garbage. It's still useful to look at garbage that you've never seen before, because you're using your brain in the way that it was intended to be used, which is you've encountered novelty and now you have to codify that. So it's worth your effort and your energy to codify that novelty to create the habits that you need to survive. But then the world keeps changing.
So maybe, and I don't think technology is there yet, but I think maybe a slight next step in your idea would be to put people in novel situations that they're not likely to be in let's say metaverse. They put you in a whatever customer angry at you at the McDonald's checkout line situation, and you deal with it. And I think that's maybe helpful for you to figure out how to deal with difficult situations. Or they put you in a job interview, or they put you in some other stressful situation, or you go on a date with a virtual character so you can practice what you're going to say and not say. I mean, that kind of thing I can see
There
would be
you go.
really
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to get towards, right? I'm trying to move towards this idea of, rather than normalizing everything, to create more diversity using the GANs and using this kind of interactive exploration experience to give you novel experience that you can then share with others through the standard machines, and then it, you know, everyone systematizes it and then we do it again.
Yeah, I think the interaction is key though. And I don't see, like with the current technology like DALL-E, like the interaction is very limited, low bandwidth, right? You can maybe go back and forth within language and what you generate, but that's about it. You don't interact with anything.
So the idea that we're working on, I can share it with you. I have. Let me see if I can fire it up here. So this is something I've been working on with one of the researchers from SIGGRAPH. So at SIGGRAPH, just to explain, what we were showing at SIGGRAPH was this ability to fly in virtual reality. So basically, you just stand there with your virtual reality headset on, and if you lean forward, you start flying forward. If you look up, you start flying, you look up. And if you lean back, then you stop, right? So it's this very, very natural kind of motion. And you can fly around the virtual city of Vancouver. You're welcome to try it. Come over and try it anytime you want, Pam. You can basically fly without any controls. There's no like grasping or anything. It's just you know, in the same way that you ride a bicycle by leaning, you just lean and you can fly. And we got very positive feedback about that. So what if you could fly through a latent space, right? That's kind of where we're going. And if you could fly through a latent space where you could essentially have an axis of some control parameter and you can basically move backwards and forwards, can that essentially give you a novel experience? So is this the one? Yeah, so this is the latent space. I'll show it to you, one sec. And this is the art gallery exhibit I was suggesting you see. So here we have a generative model, right? So this is something, some latent space, and it's generating different ways for you to visualize something. This is just a notional example. But we have a generative system, right, that you can interact with. So maybe just by you making gestures, we can essentially control the latent parameters of the generator of this system so that this turns into a vase or somebody's face or something. And you could control it just by making very gentle body movements, and you're smoothly moving through some kind of latent space. It doesn't require language, there's no typing, really cool. You don't need to, you know, it's just this one-to-one experience that you have.
Yeah, that reminds me of, I went, like this was a long time ago before the deep learning. So let me see if I can still find this. I went to University of Santa Barbara, and their physics department, they had these 3D experience things. You put on these goggles, and I think they had like 3 models already worked out. So you would wear these gloves, and so you could touch things. And so it wasn't a latent space, it was a real 3-dimensional space, but you could be, for example, inside the hydrogen atom, and you could walk inside, you could touch, you can see how far things are. And I think they were planning
the novel
on
experience, right? That's
yeah, and that's amazing.
Trying to understand what Paul Werbos is getting at. Yeah,
and that's actually useful, right? Like if you are a scientist, you're studying hydrogen atom, like being inside of it, and kind of like the magic school bus, right? Like if you can make that happen, I think it will be super useful.
Yeah.
But latent space is another spin on it, which is really cool. So I think it's nice to go into a latent space as opposed to real space. And I guess that's a really trippy experience that's this Alice in Wonderland kind of thing, right? So
right. And I'm trying to form an argument that it's worth my effort to do this for some reason. And the argument that I've got is the ones I've been sharing with you, and I'm very happy for you to shoot them down. I really am. I'm very happy for you to shoot them down if they're not good arguments. Because
yeah, I don't think you need an argument. This is interesting enough. Like, who cares what the usefulness of it is? Like, if you,
so you think it's interesting? That's
oh yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
what about you, Rob? Do you think it's interesting?
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
It would be more interesting to me if, like, I was a, physicist and wanted to get inside an atom or something.
Once again, my goal is to democratize this so that it's relevant to many people, not just scientists.
Right,
so,
but I look at that and sort of in my mind, it's okay, we have something that looks like a cube and it's kind of evolving.
It's a straw man. It's just some generative model that we could see. That's all we just wanted something simple, so we just used Perlin noise. But...
Right, but kind of going with Pym's idea too, it becomes more interesting when we have some context.
Right, which is why I'm suggesting that you would seed it with an image, right? So you would put an image in there, and then you would be in the room that's in the picture of the image, right? And then you could look at the vase and then move left and move right while you're looking at the vase, and the vase changes or something, something like that. So there's this kind of interactive exploration of counterfactuals that is embodied. There's a lot of bingo, buzzword bingo, but yeah, to try and create experiences that anyone without language or skill or anything. See, one of the things I notice at SIGGRAPH is when you put people's this headset on there in this leading interface, you don't have to explain to them how to fly. Like, they just know it. Right? They just start flying and they just fly around, and it's totally obvious to them what's going on because they've ridden a bicycle. They have priors that help them. Did you find it, Ryan?
Yeah, I found one version of it. I don't think it's the right one, but it reminded me of the hydrogen atom thing. So I think there's two directions you can take it. Maybe the one that you've taken is, so you take some experiences and people are generally familiar with, and you want to extend it beyond what the normal, like flying. So people can imagine flying. But what I thought was very interesting about this one is, so you were inside, I think it wasn't just the physical hydrogen atom, you were inside the wave function for the hydrogen atom. So that's something you will never experience. You will see the probability waves and you can go through it and see where is more probable, where it's not. It was like a cloud. So that gives you something that maybe it's very hard to imagine unless you are a super smart person, or let's say they take you into 10 dimensions or something and you can somehow explore walking in 10 dimensions and experiencing that. I think that would be super useful. Yeah, I haven't found it. I don't know how to search for it. It was quite a few years ago. I don't know what they called it. I just remember it was University of Santa Barbara. What would you call such a thing?
Pedagogical experience. I don't know. I'm actually trying to give you. Okay, well, that's very encouraging because it basically means that you think I'm on a reasonable track. So that's, yeah, because I have no, I have no idea. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, maybe it's this one, I share it, but it might not be they call it the allosphere. They seem to have added quite a few different projects. One of them is like interactive fabric simulation. That's interesting.
You share the link. Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't definitely as sophisticated as the pictures suggest when I went there, but that was probably more than 10 years ago. So I'm guessing they have improved it since.
Well, maybe it'll help me understand quantum theory.
Maybe
yeah, I mean, that's the idea.
Understand
Right?
what Paul's getting at, because I'm sure he's onto something. I just don't know what it is.
Is he working on quantum theory now?
He's working on quantum AGI.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's way out there.
But no, I have immense respect for Paul. I don't doubt that he's onto something really amazing. It's just beyond my prior. I have no idea. So I don't know what to do with these wonderful emails he sends me. So yeah, interesting. All right, guys. Well, I might roll on, but thank you for that. Yeah, I'll keep you posted as to how we're going. We're trying to get rid of the headset currently. So what we're doing at the moment is, I can show you if you're interested. One second. So how do I do that? I go to here. I'll share my screen. It's just waiting for it to open. Just give me 1 moment. Sorry. Just a second. I'll let you go. I might show you next time. It might be easier if I show you next time. Basically, we've got rid of the VR headset, so you can just look at the screen and I'll show you. 1 second. It's up. Is that it? Yep.
But how would you get it to be 3D then?
It's your, so that's the psych. You basically, your brain can actually do that. So it can, our depth perception actually is nowhere near as good as we make it out to be. Yeah, so let me, I'll just make this a little bit smaller so you can actually get some kind of frame rate. Just drag up my desk here. So I have to take up my headphones, so I'll just unplug this. Right, okay. So I'm just standing in my lounge room, and to my right is a Connect. I think you know what a Connect is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah. So the idea is, hello, going to work. No, it's not plugged. No, yeah, it's going to work. Okay. So I'm looking at my screen, and what you're seeing is my screen, right? So if I move to the left, you can see that I'm actually looking through a window on my desktop, right? Mm-hmm. So I can essentially have my screen be a window into another world, and I can actually fly around it just by moving left and right. And I can see into that world and fly around it. That world, I'm hoping, will be a latent space that you can essentially, like, you could look at this lampshade over here, and then you could, you know, grab it somehow and then manipulate it, and then it would change into a different something or other, or something like that. That's the kind of rough idea. Mm-hmm. It's not anywhere near ready yet, but that's kind of where we're going. So I just thought I'd share that. So,
I like the twist of like traveling through latent space as opposed to real space, so that depending on what latent space you choose and how densely populated it is, I think it would be really cool.
Cool. All right. Very good. Well, I'll keep you posted. That's the idea. And it's all related in our discussion. So I consider you collaborators in this, not observers. So if you have any ideas or if you want to come and try it, you're always welcome. Rob, I could easily, if you get a little bit, do you have a beefy machine somewhere, like something with a proper graphics card in it? Or do you have
define proper?
Late series NVIDIA high-end graphics card.
Yeah, I mean, the one I got's like 4 years old.
Okay, is it 980 or something like that? Or, no clue. Do you have access to a fast machine, Brian?
I have a 3090 GPU.
That's plenty. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. The CPU is kind of old, so I don't know how.
Yeah, that's fine. It's all graphics anyway. And do you have a Connect?
I don't have a Connect, no.
No, okay. That's a bummer. Oh, well, I might have to get the. I have a spare one. I can send it to you if you. We can meet up and I can just give it to you if you want to try it at home. It's really easy to try. But cool. All right, guys. Well, very good. It's a shame Rose couldn't join us, but I'll reach out to her and see how she's doing, and hopefully she can join us next time.
Awesome.
Excellent, guys. All right. Take care. Talk
See you
soon.
next time.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.